Hello everyone and welcome back to the Game Emporium, where some friends have gathered around the table to talk about some board games. My name's Luke, that is Ross.
Hello.
And if you're new here, welcome. We are talking about our top 50 games of all time as of last month-ish. Which is an interesting proposition because there's a game that we've been playing recently that I think if we redid our list now, it probably would sneak in somewhere.
Yeah.
I tried to do a little bit of comparison of where it would probably land about now, but I thought if I did that, it's going to throw the entire list off, so I won't bother worrying too much about it. But it might be probably in this section.
I mean, at least I'd say half of this list down by one, so then it starts really throwing out. Right?
Top 25? Is that what you're thinking?
So I think somewhere, probably, yeah.
It's about where it is. We're talking about Windmill Valley as the game that we're...
Or Watermill Valley, as it should be called.
Yeah, Watermill Valley. It's
the hill I would die on.
Which you can't do because it's the Netherlands. It's all flat.
That's true. That is true. Yeah, that is true.
The
river I will drown in. Maybe that's the.
That's the imagery I guess we're going for. We are going through our top 25 to 21 in this video. If you haven't seen any of the previous ones, go check them out before you come here, so you know before you start commenting saying, "Why is my favourite game not here?" We may have already talked about it. It may never come up. It may be coming up later. Those are the things that might be happening. That is how lists work. Yeah. So
opinions work as also, I guess.
I mean, also opinions, right? Yeah. And if anything, we're sort of determining that along this list we have similar opinions, but there's definitely some games on your list that I would like.
There've been, no
chance whatsoever. Whereas you've got, it's the same way. But last list, kind of spoiler alert. Fit to Print, for example, featured in pretty much the same spot.
Yes.
So
I think it's interesting because there's a Venn diagram of Ross's preferences, a Venn diagram of Luke's preferences.
Yes.
And I think the crossover is probably in the top 30 of our games. I think there's a lot of crossover.
I think so, yes.
But I think in that 30 and down, there's it's probably sitting on the outside of those circles because there's a lot of games that we do both like, but our favourite games are probably there's a lot more crossover.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. There's a few in here. There's a few that you've already mentioned, which is the thing. So, and there's a few that I don't think you've played. In my top, looking at my top 10. Actually, probably my top 15.
I said that, and then now I'm looking at my top 10, and I'm like, maybe I'm just told a bold-faced lie. In fact, a quick readjustment of my assessment, having actually looked at all of the data now, is the Venn diagram. I think the middle ground that we're talking about now, there's going to be lots of crossover. I think our favourite games are different. I think these games are good, but maybe not quite our everyday play games are different. But there's a nice little middle ground bit which we have a lot of crossover.
Yeah, and
I've now corrected my
assessment. There's probably a bit where there's the games that you love, and I'm like, yeah, I play this, and then the other way around kind of thing, where there's just all fitting. So that's the area of grey that we're going through. I'm thinking of Venn diagrams. We should probably play Things in Rings, because I hear that's very good as a little party game. So we'll see if that ever comes available over here. We'll give that a play. With all that said, let's dive into our number 25s.
Having just said there's loads of crossover, I don't think this is on your list at all, and I don't think necessarily because you think it's a bad game. I think it's just probably not one that you don't own, you don't play often, etc. Is Celte? Forget
that. Oh, really?
Yeah. So I quite like this game. So I'm going to say it's quite a simple game, and I think that's probably not necessarily true. But it is in comparison to maybe some of the other games where I would put it into this sort of similar genre. Anyway, you're essentially a clan, shall we say? That's probably the best way to put it. And you are based in kind of early Britannia history. Vaguely Pict-ish, I guess.
Yeah, kind of early.
I'm just trying to figure out the right way of explaining it because it sounds complex, but it's really not. Essentially, you have discs which represent different types of workers, and then you are putting some of those into your clan. You're putting some of those out onto, or you're picking some up from the board, and depending on how many you have in your clan, depends on how good you are or how strong that action is going forward. I think that's probably the right way to word it. There's a timer that goes around the board that keeps pace of the game and rounds in the game. And the thing that reason why it's up on this list and I quite enjoy, and I think I've seen creeping into a couple of other games as well, not to imply this guy was the first, but I've just seen it more frequently, is you select the scoring criteria at the end of the game each time that round turner kind of goes.
Yes.
So that's really nice because you can kind of manage your strategy as you're moving along and making sure that you're kind of playing into maybe something that's going to be a little bit different. There's a little bit of a back and forth or combat within there. It's just, I find it really hard to describe this game. And I don't know why, but it's just got a nice little mixture of everything. I need to play it more, is where it's sitting in, because I quite enjoyed it. It's quite quick to play.
Yes.
It just has things that I don't have in other games in my collection. That's probably the better way to phrase the like of it.
Yeah, you're going around this rondel taking the different actions, and it's, I don't know, it is hard one to explain. Art by Amico, so it's, it's something that we're quite familiar with, the Garfield games. That's the style they go for.
Yeah, and there's a bit more of an area control thing as well, which I don't usually gravitate towards as much. This is probably, here we go, I'm nailing it down as I'm literally thinking out loud. It's kind of deck builder, bag builder, kind of engine builder-esque. But I find with a lot of games like that, particularly engine builders, you tend to get locked into the strategy that you've selected, right? So you pick up like a card or you pick up a tile or something, and that means for the rest of the game, sure, you get to do that multiple times, but you're kind of locked into doing that thing. Whereas it's quite free-flowing on this, where you're trading your workers, essentially, the type of workers you have, in and out. And so you can flex quite easily on the strategy you're going, which means that you don't feel like you're locked in really early on. We've probably over-talked this game now, to be honest with you, but it's a good one. I think it's probably not that well known either.
No, it isn't.
Well, I would say.
I mean, when you first mentioned it to me as one that you were trying to pick up from somewhere, and I think we just came across a copy of it randomly. It was one that I'd never heard of. I don't think this publisher is particularly well known. I don't know who the publisher is.
Oh yeah, Pythagoras. I did know this.
Because I don't know many of their other games, which is not necessarily a slight on them. There's thousands of games come out every year, so this is probably one that just slipped under the radar for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think they're a Portuguese publisher, so I think their games tend to be very local.
Yes. So
I don't think there's anything which is I could mention which you would go, oh yeah, but literally I don't think there's anything.
No.
But there'll be someone, maybe, who's Portuguese who's watching this going, yeah, we have loads of the games, we play loads of the games.
Yeah, it's all we have.
The really curious thing about the game, the thing that made me laugh, but it's interesting, is there's a number 2 on the side of the box, right? So it kind of implies there's a series, but there's
nothing to say.
I mean, there's not a series as far as I'm aware of anything. So I don't think there's a number 1.
I don't know. There should be at least a number 1. We did. I think we searched for this at the time we played it, didn't we? Because we were like, this is number 2. What's number 1? I don't know. Who can say?
Anyway, right. We can wrap up. Tell me about yours.
Yeah, my number 25 is a game that's going to probably appear higher on your list. I know it was like your number 2 or 3 last time we did this. This is one of your favourite roll and writes. In fact, it's probably the roll and write that drew me into the genre. This is Cartographers. So, Cartographers is, as the name suggests, you're making a map. And what's going to happen is on each turn, you're going to flip over a card, you're going to have a terrain and a polyomino shape on it. You're going to be drawing that onto your map to fulfill the Queen's orders for each of those scoring criteria. And over each of the seasons, you have 2 different ones that you're going to be scoring. And each one will score twice. So first, you'll do A and B, then you'll do B and C, then you'll do C and D, and then D and A. So you'll just sort of cut through your way through there and get what you need to do scoring-wise. Cartographers is one of those games that is incredibly simple to teach. It plays from 1 to 100, and the only reason it's limited by 100 is because that's how many sheets are in the box.
Yeah.
So you can literally, if you've got the copies, play with anyone you want to. There are 6 different expansion maps that you can play with now. I think there's more coming. And you have the Cartographers Heroes, which has more maps and has different monsters that come out, that as the monsters come out as ambush cards, you will then draw on your opponent's maps and just go, here's a big monster you have to deal with. Those will got your negative points. There are mountains to surround that will get you coins, different shape choices. You can take smaller shapes that will give you a coin, which will give you ongoing points, but it means you're going to cover up less terrain. And it's just such an elegant game that's very easy to play, very easy to stylize. There are people who I've seen have made stamps for each of the different terrain types, so that you can just go bop, 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 onto different terrains. If you make a mistake, tough, I guess, but you kind of have to be confident.
I mean, it's hard to do that even with pencil anyway, right? You're like, you're trying to rub it out, or you're colouring over it or whatever.
I love the Thunderworks world that is all-encompassing in it, which is great because I've got role player. I like the idea of doing role player to build a D&D character, cartographers to make a D&D character, and then going off and doing D&D in that world that you've drawn, that little mini-map. There's just all sorts of different things you can do with it, and all the different map packs offer slightly different rules and some new fun stuff. So it's, I like it. It's a good game.
Having just spoken quite a lot anyway about another game, I will save all of my comments probably for when it does appear. Definitely will appear much further up in the list, I think. But yeah, I mean, everything that you said, the main reason why I like the game is the same reason why I sent this picture to you. Was I was playing with my wife. She's plays some games, but it was one I could so easily introduce her to, and she really, really enjoys. Probably one of her favourite games. And yeah, it's so easy to teach people and get them on board, and it's a really good puzzle behind it. I mean, it probably is the roll and write for me, I think.
Yeah. All right. Well, easy enough. We're going to come back to that later on, I'm sure. That's our number 25. So let's go to 24. My number 24, this is definitely a game that you have not played, as far as I know. This is just I can't remember whether you've played this or not, which is ironic, because this is a memory game. This is That's Not a Hat.
I think I have played it.
Have you?
When did I play this?
Well, whilst Ross is trying to remember that, That's Not a Hat is just a simple little card game where everyone is given out a card which has a line drawing gift on it. And what's going to happen is each time you're going to have a card in front of you, you're going to flip it, you'll get a new one added to the pile for the first player. You'll flip the card you have face down and pass it in a direction left or right to the next player. And it will have a arrow on it, say which way it goes. So you'll pass it along and you'll say, this is a skateboard. Say to the person on your left. They will flip over their own cards that they have to face down, follow the arrow it goes, and it might come to you, or it might go to the next person in the chain on the left and go, this is some cheese. And it will go round and round and round until it comes to a point where these 7 items, if you're playing in a 6-player game, are around the board, and you just go, where's the cheese? Have I got the skateboard? Is that the baguette? And you just have no idea where things go. Even playing at 4 players, there's only 5 things on there. We're adult humans. We can remember where 5 things are, right? No, you can't. I barely remember where my keys are. So this thing is just going to be moving around, and if it comes to you and you're just like, oh yeah, that's, you pass over to someone and you go, this is cheese. And they'll go, I have the cheese. So you take the card back and you reveal it. If it is the cheese, then they take it as a penalty point. If it's wrong, then you take it as a penalty point. And then the whole thing goes again. First person to get 3 points automatically loses, and then whoever has the fewest wins the game. It's very simple. It has no reason to be as fun as it is to play. Because, as I say, we're adults. We should be able to remember where 5 different things are. And you just can't. And the game doesn't play very long. It's about a 15-minute max kind of game.
Yeah.
And it's just silly. It's just fun. And it's one of those things of, it was a new game experience, and playing it was just so much fun that I was just like, yeah, I love this. This is great. I think it was one of my top games of last...
Yeah.
2023. I think we talked about this in our top games of 2023 video, which will be link available up there somewhere.
I don't know why I feel like I played this, but maybe I joined and you were just wrapping up a game or something like that. I'm sure I've physically seen the game in front of me.
Maybe.
It's not on my play files, so either that way I went. I'm always cautious about games like this. The thing that obviously makes them a game, the memory element, is the thing that I don't necessarily like about it, because I feel like there's some people who obviously are good at memory games, and there's some people or have good memory, and there's some people who aren't, and it becomes more around that person's ability to memorize rather than that person's ability to strategize.
Yeah. The thing is, though, there isn't a strategy in this game because there's no choice. You're just passing a card in there, and it's a 15-minute filler game, so it kind of doesn't matter.
I'm not trying to like over labor it, but that's just kind of the thing which makes me always a bit like play that versus a different party game. I guess is kind of
sure.
where I'm going.
That makes sense. What's your number 24?
My number 24 is a Lacerda. They got to sneak in now and then. This one is the Gallerist.
Okay.
So I I mean, it's kind of sitting in the middle of the top 50 pack because it's the middle of my opinion on the Lacerdas, I think. So it's a lighter Lacerda. It's a game where you have a gallery. You're trying to essentially buy art at a low price, then publicize the artist, and then basically have the art that you've previously bought increase in value. You're trying to attract different types of people, like I'm trying to think of the right people now. Publicist, is that the right word? The general public. There's people who are going to promote your art. People who are like dealers and the general public into your gallery. So essentially you can use and abuse them to promote the art or do the thing or you sell it or whatever it may be.
Sure.
It's a very typical, I say very typical, quite typical Lacerda in the sense that there are some action spaces that you pick. You move your player piece around those action spaces. You can't pick the same one twice. And there's a little bit of a bump mechanism in that I can think of. So you've got to be cautious about which action space you're going and how you may advantage someone else off the back of that. But yeah, it's a good Lacerda. Yeah. Slightly lighter. It's a nicer theme, I think, as well, potentially, is the only other thing I was going to say. It's an easier theme to get into.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, the theme was going to be something I talked about. Is not necessarily a theme that I would gravitate towards.
Yeah.
Because I'm an uncultured swine. But, yeah, I want to give it a go, because I like some Lacerdas. I don't like all of them, as we have discovered so far. But this seems like one that I probably would enjoy to a certain degree.
I think so.
But we'll need to give it a go. As you say, it's probably going to fall into that mid. I'd be interested to see where this falls against something like Bot Factory, which is another one of those lighter Lacerdas, which we only played. Yeah, we played this 2 days ago.
2 days ago.
So we've got no comparison of where this sits against the Gallerist as far as this list is concerned. I don't know if you have any immediate thoughts on that.
Well, the Gallerist, either is a lighter Lacerda, I think it is heavier than Bot Factory.
Sure.
And I guess Bot Factory is a closer alignment to Kanban EV than it would be like the Gallerist, really. So on a ranking, I think it's always tough with the smaller box Lacerdas to really compare them again, because the big trade-off you're getting there is you're essentially playing an hour-long game versus a 2.5 hour long game or something like that. And so I think that has a bigger impact on which one you might pick to play.
Sure.
There is the trap with this game, much like with a lot of Lacerdas, that you spend 25 minutes setting the game up because there's obviously a million pieces and personal player boards and all those other bits and bobs. So versus the Bot Factory, which is 4 boards and a couple of pieces. So yeah it's but it is a good one. It is, and I think we should definitely play it so we can formulate a complete picture of all the Lacerdas.
Yes, that'll be something that we'll probably do towards the end of the year, is formulate everything that we've got on those boards. But anyway,
yes.
That's enough about talking about games that aren't on the list. Let's go on to the next games on our list, number 23.
My number 23 is one we've played very recently. In fact, we've started the campaign of. It's Near and Far.
Okay.
So it's sitting in the middle ground because, and I think it's bumped slightly off where it was, as in up slightly off where it was last time from memory.
Which is interesting because we only played it. We played it after we started this list. So you've got two options. Either you have a worker placement element, so you put your character on one of these 6, I think, action spaces, which essentially is locations in a town. That might be, you can buy essentially chocobos, which I absolutely love, which are little bird creatures. You can go work in the mines, depending on like your party that you have with you. You have like 4 characters that from each of these 4 different factions that can support you in these actions. You can get a treasure. You can recruit new people. So you can do all these actions basically within this town. Or, probably arguably the more interesting bit of the game, is there's a map, a book map essentially, that you can move your character around and you can travel. And then when you travel and you land on a location, a story is read typically. And then you get a choice within that. And then again, depending on how good your crew is at fighting people or socialising with people, depends on how successful you are, depends on the reward you get. When you're moving around that map, you've got to manage your health and how, the supplies that your party has, essentially the health that your party has, because each step that you take will make your party more weary. And then sometimes when you come to set up camp or you come to explore a story element, you might also be draining your health in order to get over those hurdles, whatever it may be. So I like it as a single player game. I think you couldn't play it multiple times in a row necessarily. I think it would get a bit iffy, but
And that was I was like, oh, this is a good game we can play now and then, which is why it's sitting in the middle of the list. We've just started the campaign of that, and I'm surprised at how uncampaigny it is, in the sense that there's not a lot of carryover between each, at least as far as we're aware so far.
Yeah.
Not a lot of carryover, and I don't think there will be anything introduced in that sense, because it's not that kind of campaign game. I don't think we're going to be surprised by anything. I don't think there'll be any core rule changes. I don't think the story will necessarily even carry over between. And so I'm a little bit nervous, I guess, really, that we're going to get to the end of the campaign and I'm going to be a bit like, woof, definitely overplayed this now, and then subsequently come to do this list and it's dropped 10 positions or 20 positions or whatever it may be. There is some story elements in this, but they're almost a bit standalone, which I think works really well for simplicity of designing the game, but doesn't necessarily mean that in a campaign setting that you're, I don't know, it's not going to replace D&D, right, for example.
Yes.
And it's not as laser focused as something I've been playing recently, which is Spire's End, for example, which is literally a kind of choose your own adventure, because the story isn't as coherent across the board. We had a couple of small threads that went through, but you know they're going to close, and there's not kind of a overarching thing. It's just basically the campaign bits, play the game 8 times, and then whoever essentially scores the best over those 8 games wins.
Yeah, and
anyway, I'll throw it over to you for your opinion.
It's a little weird because scoring the best is a kind of relative term, because it's not necessarily being focused on the story that scores you the most points, because I barely did any of the story components last time. I think I did maybe 2 or 3 of the ones that are out.
Yeah.
And I stormed the game by quite a good significant chunk. So I kind of played the game, but I didn't play the game, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's not as... It doesn't feel like it's going to be something like a legacy game where you have those different ongoing arcs and different things that will happen and will adjust. So yeah, I'm also a little bit concerned about how it's going to pan out as a campaign. Will it be something... I mean, from what I've heard from a lot of people, it's not a you return to it and play it again kind of game.
Yeah.
But you're not always seeing the same story elements, right? Because not what you randomise where you put these little book tokens that will you go and do these.
And obviously the map changes each game. We're going to flip the page of the book, and then we'll have a new map. So there'll be it might surprise me. I might be unfairly criticising it literally one game into it. But
yes,
I just as opposed to dangerously going to start talking about the game that we're both a bit iffy on, which is Now or Never, where it seems like there's a lot more character focus. I don't know how much of that is going to carry over necessarily, but I feel like I'm just moving this piece around, but I'm not really tied to the character necessarily. I'm not really growing as a person in this setting.
Yeah. There's no gear hangover from previous episodes, right?
Yeah.
So which feels like a bit of an
odd
choice, but hey, it's what it is. My number 23 is also figures moving around on a map, but mostly they're going places to kill each other. This is Unmatched. So this is a very straightforward little game where you are moving different characters around from different franchises and situations from history and different logical and literary
interesting characters, I think, is probably the summary, right? Yeah.
Just weird and mostly fictional characters that will run around and do their various bits and pieces, and they each have their own special power. They're just fighting against each other. You've got 3 actions you can do on your turn, of which there's maneuver, attack, or do a scheme card, and you're just moving around the map trying to outfox your opponents. And it's incredibly straightforward to teach. It's very straightforward to run around and do. I think it is pretty much best played at 2, but there is all sorts of fun different character combinations you can have just thrown out of these different boxes that come together. I think my favourite set is the Cobble and Fog, which has the Invisible Man, Dracula, Sherlock Holmes, and it will come to me.
Knowledge.
Oh, Jekyll and Hyde. That's who it is. And it's just those are some those guys have all fallen into public domain, so they can be utilised as characters for this. But you can have Dracula against Spider-Man, which is an interesting combination, because I guess that comes up in the comic books as well. But you've also got Robin Hood and Beowulf and Bigfoot and all sorts of different things that come together and will just battle it out to be the best. There's a little bit of asynchronicity with these characters. It's just some fun stuff that will happen. And there is the co-op version which is Unmatched Adventures, which, spoiler alert, might come up later on this list because I consider that to be a separate game, but they are fully cross-compatible, and it's just a very interesting, fun little system. I thought I'd stopped, but then they brought out Unmatched Adventures, and it pulled me back in. I don't think I'm going to go as hard on as I have done in the past, because there's definitely some characters that I'm not that interested in. Like there's a Houdini versus Genie set, which is like, okay, that's kind of cool. I'm not that interested in Houdini. I'm not that interested in, I think they've announced this now, the Witcher. They've got a set coming out for The Witcher, which I haven't played the video games. I watched a bit of the first series on Netflix. I didn't care for it. So it's probably not one that it's not going to be one that I pick up. However, I do like a lot of the other sets. There's a whole bunch of Marvel sets. There's a whole bunch of fun, different things coming out. And I think they announced this, like the Unmatched Adventures. The next one that's coming out is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I just love the idea of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles now fighting things, which is kind of fun. So that's probably.
Is it one turtle or is it interchangeable?
All four of them. So you could, but it's the co-op version, so they're fighting against Shredder and.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Foot. But yeah, so they're fighting against all their rivals, which is that's a fun way of taking that team.
That's cool.
So I like that. So yeah, that's. Oh, sorry. You got
it was a very quick comment on it. I think of all of the kind of like typically 1v1-esque games or like duel kind of games, I think this is one of the ones that I like the most, and probably because there's sort of deck builder in there, in the deck playing cards management, that kind of thing. I quite like that's the mechanic behind it, rather than, and I'll go very short on this, like dice throwing, for example, where you're rolling dice and it feels just a bit, I don't know why, it just feels like there's less control over that, or it feels like there's less choice over that.
Sure.
Whereas you can manipulate your hand a little bit better, I think, in Unmatched.
Certainly. Yeah. Awesome. Cool. That's my number 23. That's our 23. Let's go into 22. Okay, so my number 22. This is quite a fall from grace from where it was. I mean, relatively, like as far as anything goes.
You've hyped it up now.
Principle. I know it's a fall from where it used to be. It used to be my number 4 game of all time, and I think it used to be the number 4 on BGG.
Well, that is quite a big fall of grace, but yeah, go on.
It's not as bad as Final Girl had a bigger drop. But anyway, this is Terraforming Mars.
Okay, makes sense though.
Yeah. So Terraforming Mars is a game where you are terraforming Mars. What you're doing on this is you're playing out different cards, you're playing as different corporations, you're spending money to play cards from your hand or to finance particular projects on the board, where you're just trying to put down greenery and sea tiles and just try and build this engine of cards that comes out. I kind of went all in on this game with some big 3D model stuff, which is fun to play with, and I do quite enjoy playing with it. I just haven't gotten the game itself to the table for a little while. I do think that something like the Prelude expansion is necessary because it helps speed the game up, it helps focus up the game. I mean, we played it on BGA recently where it didn't have the Prelude. It was just like, oh, this is a slog to get going. Whereas Prelude does at least give you some form of direction to start with. A little bit of asynchronicity as well. There's a Prelude 2 that's come out. I know that there's some big stuff going around about Terraforming Mars about using AI art, which I think we've talked about on this channel before. Is AI art okay? How it's used and how it's generated, questionable.
Less okay, yes.
Yeah, so I don't know the specifics of how Stronghold Games do it with Terraforming Mars, or at least with the expansions that are about to come out. So yeah, but I mean, this big box version of Terraforming Mars, the original game, I think is my favourite way to play, as opposed to Ares Expedition, which I've since sold, and the dice game, which I really did not enjoy. I felt like I had no control in it. But it's just a race to get points and bump up these different tracks, and I just enjoy it for the puzzle that it gives and the replayability. Huge stack of cards, different tags. It's one of these things of like, why do I like this but I don't like Art Nova? I don't quite understand it. But I really enjoy Terraforming Mars. I just really dislike Art Nova. I don't know what it is, but I mean, you're of the similar opinion on that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember is it even in my top 50? I can't even remember.
Probably
I don't
not.
think I've mentioned it. I don't think it's come up. I really enjoy it. I think you're right. The 3D thing also adds a little bit of element to it. I think the Prelude is absolutely necessary because otherwise it is quite slow. It's just, I think it's just a victim of time a little bit, probably more than anything else. I think there's just other fresher games that are out now, and that's why it's slipping down the list, or it's maybe not as doesn't get played as much, particularly like your copy, for example, when we've got other games to play. Yeah, it's good. It's, I guess, a victim of time a little bit.
Yeah, maybe. All right, we got number 22, Ross.
Yeah, my number 22 is a game that neither of us own. Controversial, maybe. But I think it's replaced a game that you don't like and a game that I do like, which is Agricola. It's replaced it. It's been replaced by. So this is Caverna. Which is maybe arguably a much simpler version of Agricola, but you have a player board with half of it's essentially a cave, half of it's some fields. You select some actions from a main board, which typically would be like digging or placing a room in your cave, or clearing some forestry, I think it is, and then putting some fields down, and you're getting some bonuses when you do those, and then you're building a bit of an engine, and then you're getting enough of all of the different things that you're scoring some points and not getting any negative points, basically. So that's kind of vaguely it. The reason why I think it's moved, or essentially replaced, because I think Agricola was, or Agricola, depending on which preference, but I think it's Agricola, was about position 18, I think, on my last list. On this is 22, so I feel like they've literally, and Agricola's not in my list, so they're literally almost like a one-for-one swap at this point. Your strategy and how successful you are in Agricola is really dependent on the cards that you get at the beginning of the game.
Yes.
You have no ability to pick up or discard or exchange or do anything with those cards. So if they don't quite mesh very well, you can have a less successful game, and that can be a bit frustrating. Mm-hmm. I know you have I hate feeding people position on basically all of these games.
Well, it's not that I hate feeding people. There are certainly games where there are feeding people. Stone Age, Feast for Odin, those are games where you're feeding your people, right? And I don't feel the same animosity as I do towards Agricola and Caverna, because not feeding your people ruins your day in a way that it doesn't quite do as much in Feast for Odin or Stone Age. There's a very minor penalty for not feeding your people, whereas in Agricola it's crippling. And if you don't do it, you have to scrap everything else you're doing to get food.
Yes.
And there's not necessarily enough food spots to make it worthwhile. Because as you say, if you don't get the cards to do it, to generate food properly, you're hosed.
Yes.
And I hate
because with Agricola, you start off with Agricola. You start off with just 2 workers, and so essentially for the first few rounds you're kind of using at least one of those workers to get some food when you kind of want to be building your engine. It suffers a little bit from the same thing we were talking about Terraforming Mars, which is it almost needs you want like a jump start into the game, so that you're doing the fun bit of the game, which is basically building a farm. But we're talking more about Agricola than we are about Caverna. But Caverna is basically, I think, is just a slightly simpler version, a slightly gentler ride, and has thus kind of taken the position a little bit. If I had it, which is kind of how I made the decision. If I was picking between the 2 to play, it would probably be Caverna that I would pick.
Sure. I hate Agricola to an extent that I never wanted to play or really learn how to play Caverna, and I think maybe that's a false prejudice on my side, but also I kind of I've played it a couple of times on BGA. I have no real desire to delve deeper into it. It's one of those of it is. I think it is quite an old game now at this point. It's what, 2009, 2013, maybe in that sort of era. Yeah. I just don't enjoy it.
2013. You were right. I just googled.
Played it a couple of times. Didn't enjoy it. Never felt the need to dive deeper into it. So I'm not gonna really talk about it. Save the energy to talk about games I want to talk about. Alright, so that's our 22, so let's go into 21. Last one on this list.
So, the last one on this little bit, and I don't think you've mentioned it yet, but I think you probably will, is Tilitum. So...
Not on my list, actually.
Oh, interesting.
It's number 60 for me.
Okay.
So it's 10 below this.
So
I'll explain.
This has jumped, I think, about 15 places or something like that. Quite a big jump on the list. I've played it. When did I play it most recently? At AirCon, and I mean I like it because it's just. I mean, if I'm going to sound really boring, because kind of all of my games, I kind of very similar. Hey, what you do in this game is you're placing some pillars, you're moving your market wagon around, you're traversing Europe, really. I think mostly France.
Yeah, pretty much. There's bits of France, there's bits of Belgium, bits of Germany.
Yeah, that's fair. And you've got your own personal board, and you're essentially housing people. So you're moving people off from like a main board, basically, and you're trying to fill them up and trying to score some points. It's just all of that's very like vanilla, I guess, or standard. The interesting bit is you roll a bunch of dice and basically are placing them on a rondel, and then depending on the numbers, depends on like the section it goes on, which means like the actions you can do, and then also the number of that resource that you get. So it's I quite like there's quite a lot of variability in that, but it's not it doesn't feel random. It feels like you can strategize or plan around it.
Yeah, because the relationship between the dice and the things, the dice are all different colours, so they relate to a different resource. So when you take them off, you're going to get that many of the resource. If you then take that away from 7, you have that many action points to completely achieving action below it. But you also have the option to mitigate the dice. You can increase or decrease the value of the dice by spending gold, so you can manipulate it to go, okay, I don't want this, but I do want this resource, but I need slightly more of it, so I'm going to pay 2 gold to increase it, and then I can take this action, which means I get a load of action points for it. Or I don't get as many action points for it, but I get a lot of the resource, which means I can fuel the action and that kind of stuff. Yeah, I like it. I like that in that system, and I like that there is the option to mix up the actions and on the wheel. I don't think we've ever played it that way before, but you can do it where you can just mix up the actions and scatter them around the board. I think it fell lower on my list because I hadn't played it for quite a while, and the main lingering thing that stuck for me is it's a very beige board.
It is a very beige board. It is, yes it is.
Which, you look at the box cover, it's a very pretty box. It looks like it's vibrant, it's full of energy, but then you put it on the table and it looks meh.
I think we've had a previous conversation where I said the theme that usually doesn't draw me to a game is like kind of a generic historic. Here's just dump you in the middle of like medieval Europe, and you've got to do some medievally things or something. And so I think the pull of the strategy behind the game elevates it for me. Otherwise, I think I wouldn't necessarily pick it if I didn't know anything about the game. I wouldn't pick it off the shelf.
Yes,
it's probably
which is interesting because I think Tillerton was probably the last game that Board and Dice did that fell into that kind of trap of attractive box art, not so attractive board art. Because the whole T series, like Tiamat and Tekenu and that sort of stuff, they've all got quite beige, dull boards. Fast forward a couple of months to what's come out recently, Barcelona, which is incredibly pretty. Windmill Valley, which I think is high contender for a game of this year for you and I. That has a very pretty board and it's a very good game. So I think Board and Dice have sort of taken that feedback and have pushed things on a little bit. I think they tried with Origins First Builders. That's got a colourful board. Yeah, I do like Tillerton. I think it dropped on my list from, it was my 30 last time we did this, so it's dropped down a fair chunk because I hadn't played it for a while. I did this list and then I played it maybe a week or two afterwards. Either that or I played it a week or two before I played this and was like, okay, I'm not in a huge rush to play this again, but it's still a very good game. And it's one of those that I think you couldn't play too many times back to back.
Yes.
Which we have done with Windmill Valley for some reason.
Yes, we have.
Played that like 3 or 4 times already. And we've just kept on going with it. So yeah. It's a very pretty board. It's good, fun stuff. Medieval Europe doing medieval Europe things.
Yeah.
My number 21 is not a game that is in medieval Europe doing medieval Europe things. This is very much set in the future-ish. If not maybe not the future era, maybe it's certainly the current era. This is Maglev Metro.
Ah, nice, yeah.
So Maglev Metro is a game, it's a pick up and deliver game where you are getting robots, picking them up from their different cities and taking them to either people to work or taking robots to different factories so they can do their various bits and pieces. But you've got this little action selection board that you can make the action stronger by putting robots into them, which is a really fun little puzzle. So you can lay track, you can move around, you can pick up workers and passengers, you can drop them off. You can take them to this central hub, you can reverse your train, you can maneuver your engine around and do different things with it, you can put them into different scoring objectives. It's just a really interesting game that's quite good fun to play because you get that nice little puzzle. You've got these acrylic tiles that you lay down to overlay your tracks so you can see them very clearly on the board, and you can see who's going where. And it works much like a regular subway in that it's going around and it's got certain restrictions on where you can place it. You can't go through. If you go through water, you've got to build better. It's going to take 2 action points in order to do this. There's all sorts of different expansion maps that go with it. The first 2 maps were Berlin and New York, but there's maps that are London and Paris. There's the Moon is one of the maps that I've got. I've got the expansion maps over on the side. I haven't played with it yet. So I think for birthday, that's going to go on the list for birthday games to play one of the expansion maps. Because I feel like that would be quite good fun. The only knock on it is that you've got this effectively a triple layer board because you've got the dual layered on both sides so you can fit in. Some of the tiles don't quite fit in there, which I think is just a very
I wasn't going to mention it because that was probably the thing that most annoyed me about our play was that the type, like, for what is a very tactile bit of the game, for it to not work was a bit kind of, I don't know, a bit annoying, a bit silly. I think probably is actually the better word for it.
Yeah, but it's just one of those things of you're going to get printing errors. It will happen. Yeah. There's ways around it, kind of. It's not, I could take like a chisel to it and just sort of shave it off a little bit.
Literally, a little shave,
but it's a very good game. It's quite good fun. It does something different. I just like it.
Yeah, I don't really have much more to throw in there. Yeah, we should play it on the birthday bit that's coming up. I quite like the ability to strengthen the actions. So it is good.
Yeah, cool. So that is our 25 to 21 games of all time. Let us know what you think down in the comments below. If there are any games on here that you think we should have in this section, what fits in your lists in this particular area, and if we're wrong with any of our other opinions of games that we've talked about, tell us if you've heard of Keltay. Because we sure as hell hadn't before we played it, so let us know. If you like what you see here, please do give us a thumbs up, subscribe, tell people about us. I think at this point we're very close to getting to 50 subs, which is quite nice.
Ooh, nice.
So we're slowly chugging along, talking to people. It's nice, it's good fun. We enjoy doing this, so this is why we keep doing it. We're not doing it for like money or subs or prestige or anything. We just like talking about board games, so it's good fun. So until next time, thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you very soon. Bye bye.